Welcome to the Family Law Channel. I'm Scott Drake. A new study suggests that in cases of suspected child sexual abuse, if more time is used by a skilled forensic interviewer, children who are reluctant to disclose the information might eventually do so. My guest is retired Superior Court Judge in Santa Clara, California, Judge Eugene Hyman. Judge, welcome back.
Thank you.
So this is an interesting study, and it suggests that if interviewers do use more time, that many more of these children might come forth with the information. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so what is the typical process used now?
Well, the first step is going to be, obviously, someone's going to report it. Usually it's a mandatory reporter. Occasionally it's a parent, but more likely than not, it's going to be a mandatory reporter like a therapist, a school teacher, a counselor, something of that nature. What happens in many of these cases is that a child confides in a friend. The friend then confides in an adult, whether it be that friend's parent or someone at school, and then that person ultimately calls the police. So the police come out, and then you have the initial reporting officer who's going to be the one that talks to the reporting party, but ultimately talks to the child. The average responding police officer is has not received a great deal of training in how to talk to sexual assault victims, especially to young children who may be the victims of sexual assault. Ultimately, the case goes to the detective division, and it's assigned to a detective who may or may not have specialized training, and then that person ultimately does the follow-up. But what the study seems to indicate, which does not come as a surprise to me or to anyone in the criminal justice system, is that you have to develop a rapport. And you also have to have special skills in terms of how to ask questions of potential victims in terms of, number one, gaining their trust, but also equally important so that you don't somehow supplant your views into the minds, especially of vulnerable children. In other words, how do you ask questions in an open way? On the other hand, if you have children that are very young, you're going to have to direct them a little bit in order to be obtaining the information you need. But how do you do that in a way that's not invasive and doesn't somehow supplant information that may not be true? And this trust establishment takes time. But I think the study also is important for another reason, and that is that I think you have to establish a trusting relationship in other kinds of interpersonal crimes, especially those that may be ongoing, not just sexual assaults, but also domestic violence. In order to find out what has happened, especially on prior occasions, which is important because prior incidences, in many cases, whether they're charged or not, are eligible to be introduced for modus operandi, for identity, for a mistake or on purpose, and also, sexual assault. And in order to be able to obtain this information, it's important to establish a relationship. And unfortunately, due to budget cuts and lack of personnel and timing and things of that nature, unfortunately that relationship is rarely established. And as a result, there are all kinds of crimes that probably have occurred that are not being established. That's important in order to obtain the maximum treatment for victims, not just in terms of prosecuting or holding accountable the individuals that have committed the crimes, but in order to receive the optimum benefit for victims. And if you don't establish what has happened, you can't get them to the appropriate treatment.
And that was my next question, is that studies also show, though, Judge, that in these types of cases, I'm not sure, but between children and adults, for example, who are, trying to recount the activity, the vast majority of them never report it, right?
Correct. The vast majority of domestic violence, as well as most victimization, is underreported.
And do you see this study relating to domestic violence in many ways?
Oh, absolutely. because in order to really understand, or for a victim to actually talk truthfully about what has occurred, especially when we're talking about sexual assault, which is an important component of domestic violence, there has to be that trust. And it's very difficult for a female victim to talk to a male investigator about sexual behavior that's occurred that was not consensual, especially if it involves it's more than just intercourse. It might be oral, it might be anal, or it might be foreign object, and those are not the kinds of things that people easily talk about.
That's for certain, Judge. Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.